There are certain human experiences, emotions, reactions that we all share, but we rarely, if ever, admit to them. Not out loud.
They exist in the shadows.
Exactly. They stay in the private theater of our own minds, I think because they conflict with this image we have of ourselves as this good, supportive person we want the world to see.
Right.
But there is one specific emotion. It's perhaps the most universally experienced and at the same time the least publicly admitted.
I think I know where you're going with this.
It's that secret, almost electric flash of pleasure. That brief but really, really satisfying feeling when someone you know.
Could be anyone.
Right. A rival, a super successful peer, even some public figure. When they experience a very visible failure, a setback, a moment of real misfortune.
That's the one.
We are diving deep today into that exact feeling, which has a name, of course. The Germans captured it perfectly. Schadenfreude. Harmjoy. And we're not here to just label it as, simple wickedness or anything like that.
No, it's much more complex.
We want to frame it as a surprisingly sophisticated, deeply rooted emotional reflex, something that's almost hardwired into our system for managing social status.
That's a great way to put it.
So the premise we're really setting out to prove, and this is drawing directly from the sources you brought, it's that the reason this emotion feels so intensely good, that rush you get, is not primarily about their pain. It's actually about a very real, very potent vulnerability right inside your own mind. That joy is a measure of your own struggle.
Yes.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Why does your brain treat relief from painful social comparison as a genuine personal success?
That framing is exactly where the research is pointing. We are doing a deep examination of Schadenfreude today, and to do that, we've pulled together, a pretty complex stack of sources.
Okay.
This includes some of the most advanced neuropsychological studies out there. We're talking about techniques like functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and the really high-resolution power of something called multivariate pattern analysis, or MVPA.
We'll get into what that means.
We will. And we'll also integrate deep findings from psychosocial and personality research. So everything from the ego defense mechanisms we all use every day to the specific traits of the so-called dark triad.
So what's the mission here? What are we trying to figure out?
Our mission is really twofold. First, to map the precise neurological mechanism that drives this malicious joy. Where is it in the brain's reward centers? And second, to really examine what the intensity of that feeling reveals about the fragility of human self-esteem.
And the role of social comparison.
And the absolutely pervasive, exhausting role of social comparison that, it just defines modern life. This is a fundamental look at what it costs us psychologically to try and maintain our status.
Okay. Let's start with the biology then.
Let's start right where the science gets kind of counterintuitive. At the core of the paradox itself, we're mapping the biology of harmjoy.
Which is, by definition, a negative social emotion, right? It's a response to something bad happening to someone else.
Exactly. But subjectively, to the person feeling it, it feels intensely positive. And the most recent and frankly shocking findings show that this feeling registers in your brain in almost the exact same way a material financial win does.
Wow. Okay.
And these insights come from studies using that advanced pattern recognition within brain scans I mentioned, the MVPA.
So before you go on, for those of us who aren't neuroscientists, can you just quickly put MVPA in context? What is this technique showing us that a standard fMRI wouldn't?
That's a great question, because the difference is critical. A standard fMRI might show that, say, two large separate brain regions are active. You see a blob of light here and a blob of light there.
Okay.
MVPA goes so much deeper. It detects these subtle shared patterns of activity across thousands of neurons. It's like a signature. It can essentially say this specific signature of firing, which we already know is the signature for winning money, is the exact same signature we are seeing when you observe this other social event.
So it's not just that two things are happening in the same neighborhood of the brain. It's proof that the same exact process is running.
It's proof of identity, not just proximity. And this proof led to a really surprising discovery. The studies found that when a participant received a monetary reward,
like winning cash in the experiment.
Exactly, winning a prize, it activated a very distinct pattern in the brain's reward system. Now, the exact same population of neurons showed the exact same activity pattern when that participant got a high social reward.
Like a good reputation score or praise?
High praise from their peers, yeah.
Okay, so that makes intuitive sense. Winning cash and getting a massive compliment from your boss, they both feel good, they validate you. It's a status game.
Precisely. But here is the critical, startling leap. That exact same neural signature was also powerfully activated when participants watched a rival experience a low social reward.
Which is the scientific definition of schadenfreude.
It is. The key detail here is that social rewards, like your reputation, and tangible rewards, like money, are processed by that same core population of neurons within the striatum. That's the brain's main hub for reward and motivation.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me that the physical hardware in my brain, the wiring that processes the joy of, I don't know, getting a raise or winning a lottery ticket, is the same physical hardware that processes the satisfaction of seeing someone I secretly envy just completely trip and fall on their face?
Functionally, yes. The brain is treating their loss as your economic gain.
That's unsettling.
It is. And specifically, we're talking about areas like the nucleus accumbens or Netchak. This is the brain's famous reward center. Its job is to take emotional inputs and convert them into motivation or feelings of pleasure. And the research confirms it. The ENaC lights up intensely when we see the misfortune of others.
Especially rivals.
Especially rivals or members of an outgroup, yes. This activation shows that the brain is registering the social event as intensely positive, just as if you had achieved something yourself. Biologically speaking, schadenfreude is a reward.
So if the biological input says win, then the next logical question has to be, what are we psychologically winning when someone else fails?
Right.
And this forces us to move from the biology of the reward to the psychology of the ego. If the brain is treating this moment like a victory, what invisible war are we actually fighting?
And the data points to a very clear, and I think for many people, a very difficult answer.
Which is?
That schadenfreude functions at its core as an ego defense mechanism.
An ego defense. Okay. Let's think about just the grinding pressure of social comparison. For minds that already carry some vulnerability, some insecurity, which, let's be honest, is pretty much everyone at some point.
Of course.
The visible success of a peer or a rival creates this intense, silent, internal pressure, especially if their success feels just, slightly out of your reach. It's close enough to feel threatening.
It triggers those painful internal questions.
Exactly. Why are they moving ahead? Am I less capable? Am I falling behind? That internal dialogue is just exhausting. It's painful.
That perceived status discrepancy is a really potent psychological trigger. When your sense of self is fragile, a peer's high achievement often isn't celebrated. It's felt as a kind of implicit assault on your own status.
And so when that successful, envied person finally fails, the powerful, immediate sensation you feel isn't just, spiteful malice. It's pure, clean relief.
Relief from comparison.
Relief from comparison. The pressure, that invisible weight that you had to keep up, it just vanishes. And the mind takes this deeply efficient psychological shortcut.
Downward social comparison.
At least I'm not failing like them. And this comparison, it instantly stabilizes a threatened ego. It results in a temporary, and I think this is key, a very unstable boost to your self-esteem. So the difficult admission here is that the people who most actively enjoy others' failure, they're often just protecting a very fragile sense of self-worth. They're using an external event as a quick bandage for an internal wound they don't know how to heal.
The research is so clear on this. Schadenfreude isn't a sign of strength or cruelty. It's a signal.
A signal that what?
A signal that, in that moment, the hard work of genuine self-improvement felt more difficult than the instant gratification of that external relief.
That relationship between the internal conflict and the external pleasure, it becomes even clearer when we isolate the role of envy, right?
Oh, absolutely. Envy is the necessary precursor for most schadenfreude. It's the painful emotion you feel about another's success, and it's rooted specifically in your own perceived inadequacy, your lack of self-esteem relative to them.
And what does that look like inside the brain? Is there a difference between feeling envy and feeling schadenfreude?
A stark difference. Envy, that feeling of displeasure, is strongly linked to a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC.
And what does the ACC do?
The ACC is the brain's internal alarm system. It lights up in response to physical pain, but also to significant emotional discomfort. Things like social exclusion or cognitive conflict. When you envy someone, your brain is literally registering a form of pain.
So that internal conflict of envy, that I want what they have, but admitting that makes me feel inferior, the brain processes that as a painful state that needs to be resolved urgently.
Exactly. The mind wants to stop the pain. So when the envied person fails, the mind performs this incredibly rapid neural transition. The painful activity in the ACC linked to envy is almost instantly replaced by that reward activity in the ventral striatum and the eniac, which is linked to schadenfreude.
So the failure lets the mind swap out a painful feeling for a pleasurable one.
It does. And it provides a crucial cognitive justification for that prior negative feeling. The inner monologue shifts from pain to something else.
See, they weren't that great after all. They had it coming. This is the mind restoring a perceived balance. It's validating your previous emotional pain, and that restoration is what feels so intensely satisfying. The stronger the initial pain of envy, the stronger the subsequent reward of schadenfreude.
Wow. Okay, so if the core mechanism is all about managing status and escaping painful comparison, then we have to talk about the largest engine for social comparison ever invented.
Social media.
Social media. It is the prime daily example of harm, joy, in action.
Without a doubt.
I mean, platforms like Instagram, LinkedIn, they're designed to foster continuous upward social comparison. You're constantly seeing curated, high-achieving versions of other people's lives.
The perfect vacation, the big promotion, the impossible body.
Right, and that constant barrage naturally triggers envy and self-doubt in everyone watching. But the moment something negative gets shared, a failure, a public disappointment, that whole structure just collapses. And it generates this profound, satisfying rush of downward social comparison. It's incredibly efficient because social media creates distance. It lets you watch without any consequences, and that downward look instantly generates that feeling of, well, at least I'm in a better, safer situation right now.
Which is the fundamental motivation we were just talking about.
It is. Research shows users spend a significant amount of time engaging with content related to others' failures. Why? Because observing that unhappiness becomes a vital, immediate source of personal validation.
You know, the sources you shared brought up a historical analogy, that is. It's chilling, but it captures this perfectly.
Tertullian's heavenly balcony.
The heavenly balcony. Can you explain that?
The early Christian theologian Tertullian had this vision where the saved in heaven could look down from a kind of balcony and observe the sufferings of the damned in hell.
And they felt pleasure from this.
A particular divine pleasure. They found gratification in the justice of the punishment.
That is a frighteningly potent analogy, because it shows this need to observe and find pleasure in misfortune is so deeply rooted in us, it suggests we're almost built to seek out this kind of relief through observation.
And in the modern world, social media is our digital balcony. It lets us be passive, anonymous observers, witnessing all the minor and major downfalls of others. And it fulfills that exact same need for a comparative, distanced relief.
But the analogy also brings up a crucial point, right? It's not just about seeing the misfortune, it's about perception.
Exactly. The intensity of the pleasure you feel is not equal for every failure.
That's absolutely true. You know, if a kind, hardworking person has a small setback, we feel pity. But if a universally disliked, arrogant CEO has a spectacular public downfall,
The joy is palpable.
it is.
Yeah.
So what are the cognitive levers that are being pulled there?
The intensity is heavily driven by how you evaluate the victim's situation. Researchers categorize this into 3 dimensions: deservingness, morality, and legality.
Okay, deservingness. That feels like the big one.
It is, by far. Schadenfreude is exponentially stronger when the victim is perceived to have genuinely deserved their misfortune. Maybe they were arrogant or benefited unfairly or just behaved badly in the past.
This is what's called justice-based schadenfreude.
Exactly. Think of that high-profile CEO who's been criticized for years for mistreating employees. If they're suddenly caught in a scandal and lose everything, the schadenfreude is immense. Why? Because their downfall aligns with your moral principles of fairness. The punishment fits the crime, so to speak.
So in a way, we're using their downfall to restore our own internal sense of order. We're proving to ourselves that the universe is, in fact, fair.
You've got it. And that links directly to the other 2 dimensions, morality and legality. For most psychologically healthy people, the pleasure is even stronger when the misfortune involves a serious violation of a moral or legal code.
It gives you permission to feel good about it.
It does. You can rationalize your joy as a well-intentioned emotion. You're not being spiteful. You're just reacting to a restoration of fairness. It allows you to believe your joy is righteous, not malicious.
And does this show up in the brain scans, too?
It does. This cognitive validation is supported by the brain's emotional appraisal systems. The processing of these moral and legal violations involves areas like the amygdala and the parahippocampus. These are regions involved in figuring out the emotional importance of events.
So when the brain assesses the situation and concludes, yep, they really deserve that, it gives the pleasure a green light.
It essentially activates specialized regions that validate the pleasure being felt. It gives the schadenfreude a sense of cognitive permission. It's not just a rush, it's a justified rush.
This brings us to a really crucial point about personality. If the average person feels this justice-based schadenfreude every now and then, what defines the person who feels it constantly, who relies on it?
That leads us into the darker landscape of human personality, specifically the traits that are associated with consistently higher levels of schadenfreude.
The dark triad.
The dark triad, the three traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, all show a strong positive correlation with taking pleasure in others' misery.
Okay, so let's break those down. How does each one contribute?
Well, narcissism is characterized by grandiosity, self-centeredness, a constant sense of superiority. But it all comes from a threatened ego. Narcissists constantly need external validation that they are superior.
And schadenfreude provides that.
It's a perfect mechanism for downward social comparison. It instantly bolsters that threatened ego. They almost need others to fail to maintain their sense of high status.
Okay, and Machiavellianism.
That's marked by calculation, cynicism, manipulation, prioritizing self-interest over everything else. A Machiavellian individual sees another person's failure as an opportunity, a personal benefit. It weakens a competitor.
So for them, it's less emotional and more transactional.
Exactly. It's a useful signal that there's less competition in their way.
And finally, psychopathy.
Psychopathy involves callousness, impulsivity, and a really pronounced lack of remorse or emotional empathy. This trait just naturally lowers the psychological barrier to feeling pleasure from suffering.
Because they lack the empathy that would normally stop that response.
Precisely. The emotional mechanism that would inhibit that feeling just isn't there, or it's very weak.
That makes perfect sense. The DT traits provide the internal disposition, the self-centeredness, the low empathy. But how does that actually translate into behavior? How do these people express this joy socially?
That's a great question. The research indicates that the experience of schadenfreude isn't directly expressed by the traits themselves. It's mediated by two key psychological processes that make the emotion more socially palatable for the person feeling it.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is moral disengagement. Since enjoying someone else's pain is generally seen as unacceptable, these individuals have to do some internal gymnastics to justify their pleasure.
They have to reframe it.
Exactly. Moral disengagement is the psychological process where they justify, minimize, or just ignore the immoral nature of their pleasure. They reduce any guilt they might feel.
So they tell themselves things like, oh, they really deserved it, or everyone thinks they're awful anyway.
Right. It lets them enjoy that reward circuit activation without paying the usual cognitive price of guilt.
And what's the second mediator?
The second, and probably the most visible one, is the use of an aggressive humor style.
So this isn't just friendly teasing.
Not at all. This is humor that's used to undermine, demean, ridicule, and make fun of others, often without any regard for the harm it's causing. This style of humor serves as a very effective and somewhat socially acceptable aggressive outlet for schadenfreude.
So when you see someone who is constantly making jokes at the expense of others' misfortunes, turning humiliation into entertainment.
They're not just being funny.
They're using humor as a shield for their own insecurity and aggression.
Precisely. It's a way to express their own poor ego management or bolster their superiority complex by externalizing their schadenfreude. Studies consistently show that individuals with higher DT traits are significantly more likely to use this aggressive style of humor. It turns the humiliation of others into a source of personal entertainment.
And that's why laughter is so often the immediate physical reaction to malicious joy.
It is. It's the release valve.
Okay, so we've established that this impulse is deeply rooted in our biology. It's amplified by a vulnerable ego. But while the relief it provides is instant, the cost of relying on it is profound. There's real psychological fallout.
A huge cost.
It's important for anyone listening to understand that this is a dangerous form of self-medication. The research repeatedly shows that high levels of schadenfreude are linked to overall emotional instability in the person feeling it.
We see it manifest as chronically increased stress and anxiety levels. And long-term, it often correlates with symptoms of depression and emotional burnout.
And it must destroy relationships.
It creates a relational gap. The low levels of empathy that go along with high schadenfreude severely reduce your ability to form deep, meaningful emotional connections. It leads to chronic problems in relationships, a higher likelihood of breakdowns.
And it seems like it would create a vicious circle.
It does. A vicious circle of instability. The momentary boost you get from that downward comparison is just that momentary. The underlying wound, the insecurity, it hasn't been treated. So you remain dependent on external events to feel good.
You're constantly scanning the horizon for someone else to fail.
You are. It creates a continuous state of anxious competition, and it just tanks your capacity for genuine collaboration or generosity.
So it all comes back to that central idea, the fragility of self-esteem. If the joy you feel is inversely proportional to how you feel about yourself, meaning the lower you feel, the happier you are when others lose,
then seeking out schadenfreude is an incredibly maladaptive behavior.
it's a cheap hit that actively prevents you from doing the difficult, necessary work of building true internal resilience.
That's the key. Schadenfreude, while it feels good in the moment, is detrimental to your long-term psychological health. So the crucial task is to figure out how to disrupt this shortcut, how to reorient the brain toward healthier responses.
What does the research say? What are the strategies?
First, we have to focus on the brain's capacity for empathy. Empathy is the direct emotional counterpoint to schadenfreude. They are divergent pathways.
Activating one can suppress the other.
Exactly. Studies show that activating empathy-related brain areas, often in the left hemisphere, directly increases a person's willingness to help others. So if you can consciously choose to take the other person's perspective, to focus on their emotional experience,
To promote pro-social behavior.
the impulse for malicious joy recedes. It's a conscious choice to activate the opposite circuit in your brain.
So it's not just about trying to feel less bad for them, it's about actively trying to feel good about helping or understanding them. What about just simple behavioral changes?
This is where a fascinating and really practical finding comes in: the power of proximity.
Proximity. Just being near someone.
Research shows that simply reducing social distance can significantly mitigate schadenfreude. The studies show that just being in the same room with people you might feel competitive with, or whom you might envy, can drastically reduce the level of schadenfreude you'd feel toward them if they failed.
Why? Why does simple physical presence work so well?
Because it forces a recognition of shared humanity. When someone is an abstraction, a face on a screen, a celebrity in the news, a colleague you only see from a distance, it's easy to dehumanize them, to define them only by their success or failure.
But being in the same room changes that.
Interpersonal interactions, physical proximity, shared space, they strengthen social bonds. They bridge that critical social distance that schadenfreude thrives on. It becomes much, much harder to laugh at someone's failure when you have to look that person in the eye.
And what about our environment, our workplaces?
Context matters hugely. The sources highlight the role of the external climate. We know that the presence of an ethical climate in a workplace, one that emphasizes fairness, shared goals, mutual support, it significantly decreases the tendency for employees to feel schadenfreude toward their colleagues.
Whereas a cutthroat, egoistic climate would do the opposite.
It exacerbates harm joy. But an ethical framework acts as a protective barrier. It encourages affirmation over comparison.
This brings us to the fundamental practical choice for anyone listening. We started by saying schadenfreude is a diagnostic signal of a vulnerable self. If that rush of joy is just an alarm bell, how do we use that signal constructively to start healing?
The moment you feel that rush of pleasure from someone else's setback, you have to treat it like a clinical prompt. The lesson is to recognize that feeling not as a sign that you're a bad person, but as an alarm bell signaling an internal deficiency that needs your immediate attention.
So instead of dwelling on their failure,
You immediately shift your focus inward. You interrupt the shortcut, and you have to ask yourself a few core questions. Like, what specific inadequacy in my life is this emotion trying to mask? Am I feeling insecure about my career, my relationships, my future? And then, how can I address that internal wound, that lack of self-esteem, through my own constructive effort, instead of relying on this external shortcut of someone else's pain?
that is the essential psychological pivot, isn't it? Reframing their misfortune as a mirror for your own insecurity.
The path to psychological maturity is recognizing that the relief you get from their failure is fleeting. But the work of internal self-affirmation, of actual growth, is lasting. It's about choosing the enduring satisfaction of self-growth over the momentary unstable high of downward comparison.
If you choose the high, you stay a slave to how other people perform.
But if you choose growth, you build an autonomous, resilient sense of self-worth.
This deep dive has shown us that schadenfreude is parv. It's far more complex and probably more universal than we typically allow ourselves to believe. It's hardwired into our ancient reward systems. It gives us that primal biological sense of winning when others lose.
And it's relentlessly amplified by our modern drive for social comparison.
But the deeper, more profound truth we've uncovered is that this malicious joy is rarely a reflection of your capacity for, pure, unadulterated cruelty. More often, it's just a highly efficient, though painful, alarm bell. It's signaling an unprotected or fragile sense of self-worth that feels threatened.
It's the ego, taking the fastest, least productive path to feeling okay again.
The central tension of our psychological lives, especially around status and achievement, really lies in that choice, the easy boost versus the hard work.
True psychological development, the kind that fosters real well-being, sustained confidence, strong relationships. It means choosing the challenging work of self-affirmation and resilience. It means intentionally building a sturdy internal sense of worth, rather than grabbing for that instant fleeting relief that comes from the downfall of others.
And this leaves us with a final provocative thought to consider.
We learned that schadenfreude decreases when we are simply in the same room as the person we resent or envy. If just reducing social distance is enough to mitigate the joy we might feel from their failure, what deeper, more transformational psychological benefit might we gain if we deliberately chose to collaborate with, rather than merely observe, those whose success we find ourselves secretly envying?
We encourage you to integrate these complex truths into your understanding of yourself and others. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Subscribe to Unspoken Psychology and hit the bell button for more hidden truths about the human